And every so often you end up in a situation where you've got users that they really just abuse the amount of storage space that you have. And storage space these days is becoming cheaper and cheaper all the time. I mean, we could all recall the days back not that many years ago when a terabyte of space used to consume 3 full refrigerator-sized racks of equipment. Well, in a world these days where a terabyte can be really drilled down into something you can hold in the palm of your hand, the whole idea of storage space is something that has evolved quite a bit over time. That said, however, there are still certain circumstances where setting quotas on particular files and folders can become useful to prevent that file or folder from becoming too large. Now, in the real world, the location where quota management is used the most is typically with roaming profiles or terminal server roaming profiles. And this has less to do with the idea that you're consuming a bunch of space and space is expensive. It has more to do with the fact that roaming profiles require those profiles to be copied in their entirety every time the user logs in. And so let's use that roaming profile situation as just something we might use as an example here for quota management. Here under Quota Management, we have 2 different items to look at. The first are the Quota Templates. And these are just a series of templates that define characteristics for what you want to control through the quotas that you later create. So let's say, for example, that the basic template here for 100 megabytes. This 100 megabyte limit here defines the limit on a specific file or folder, or excuse me, on a specific folder, that says when that folder hits 100 megabytes, no matter what the content is, no matter how it got there, when that folder hits 100 megabytes, well then set up these notifications down here. So as you approach it, send emails, write events into the event log, and ultimately up here, because we're choosing a hard quota, forbid users from adding additional content after that 100 megabyte quota is exceeded. Now, it's here where you have to be kind of cautious about the setting of a hard quota versus a soft quota. And I mentioned back again that roaming profile situation where whether it's a regular roaming profile or a terminal server roaming profile, if you end up in a situation where a hard quota actually prevents a person from adding files and folders, that can actually impact the use of roaming profiles. So here you can choose whether or not you want to prevent users from exceeding the limit, or if you want to allow them to exceed the limit, but just notify you that indeed they have exceeded that limit. In most real-world circumstances, it's best to set a soft quota first, and then use that as your monitoring tool to perhaps proactively help users to get themselves underneath a certain limit. In the case of hard quotas, sometimes there can be fallout effects that end up causing users more pain than the amount of space that they're consuming. For each of these, we can set additional notification thresholds that we want here, either email thresholds, so a specific email message to that user. We can configure an event log error, so a warning that gets popped up into the event log. One assumes that in setting these event log errors that you would have some solution monitoring the event log for exactly the error message that you're creating. You can also run a command. So if you've got a PowerShell command or a script or a VB script or even a batch script, you could run that script here using one of the following command security contexts. So local service, network service, or local system. Or also you could pop up a report. Anytime this threshold gets exceeded, well then go ahead and generate a report and send that report to one of the following administrators so that they're aware of the problem, and then have all the information, all the data they need in order to help that person then resolve the problem. These are, as you can see here, there's just a few of these that are set up out of the box. These are the default quota templates that in the best practices approach, when you're using these and applying these, Microsoft highly recommends that you use the templates as the mechanisms to define the quotas. So that's why we're starting here with the templates as opposed to the quotas themselves. Now I say that because when we come up here to create a quota, let's say that we're creating a quota, for example, in that location we were dealing with before, or on the E drive here is our company shared location. Well, on that company shared location, we can choose to create a quota on that path. And then once we create that quota on the path, we can define where the properties are coming from, whether it be from one of the templates or if we define custom properties here. Now, one of the big things about choosing to create a quota on this specific path is that it doesn't do much if there are additional quotas that need to be configured sub to that location of the path. This second item down here allows you to create what is called an auto-apply quota, where the auto-apply quota will automatically apply the template that you create or assign, and then create the quotas on any existing and new subfolders of the path that we're identifying here. Back to our previous conversation on roaming profiles, if you are using roaming profiles, typically those profiles are subfolders of some folder that exists on a file server somewhere. So if this quota path were perhaps not our company shared location, but our company roaming profiles location, then the subfolders of which would usually correspond with the username of the person that's associated with that roaming profile. It's here where the auto-apply template can be used relatively easily for the creation of that quota every time, automatically, whenever a new user attempts to use and then create that roaming profile. Now, the only two PowerShell commands that I just want you to be aware of here that relate to quotas, and those are two, and there are more than them available, but these are two that can be handy for automatically updating the quotas and applying those quotas. Let me show you here, if I can clear the screen here, the couple of PowerShell commands that I want you to be aware of. The first is update FSRM quota. This will, as you can see, just begin the scan on a path that's associated with the quota template that you've configured. So if you're finding that you need to figure out right now if the information on that path indeed meets or exceeds the quota, well, this update FSRM quota will automatically just start the quota scan on that path. The other command that you'll want to take a look at is update FSRM auto quota, which provides the same functionality, but instead has to do with the auto apply quotas as opposed to the regular quotas that you would create on a single path. So this is pretty much the extent of quotas, although ostensibly these are a lot of times thought of as ways to reduce costs associated with storage. More often than not, they're used in other locations to ensure that perhaps replication of storage or the copying of storage does not begin to get really painful because the size is just simply too large.